December 1, 2023, News Report 1, Israel-Hamas conflict and ceasefire violation. The temporary ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas ended on December 1 at 7 a.m. Just an hour before the ceasefire was set to expire, Israel intercepted a rocket launched from Gaza. The Israeli military spokesperson stated that Hamas violated the terms of the military pause by firing upon Israel. Consequently, Israeli forces conducted airstrikes in the northern and southern parts of Gaza, sparking intense clashes. In a statement, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu expressed that, following the resumption of hostilities, the Israeli government is committed to achieving three war objectives: the release of hostages, the elimination of Hamas, and ensuring Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. Since November 24, Hamas released 110 hostages, including 80 Israelis and 30 foreigners. Simultaneously, Israel released 240 Palestinian prisoners. Despite ongoing battles, ceasefire negotiations between Gaza factions and Qatar, as well as Egypt, continue. However, Hamas launched rockets towards Israel during the ceasefire period, and an incident on November 30 in Jerusalem resulted in the death of 3 Israeli civilians and injuries to 7. Following the killing of 2 involved Hamas members, Hamas's top military commander, al-Wawr, declared that the October 7 attack on Israel was just a rehearsal and called for indiscriminate slaughter. On another note, the New York Times reported that Israel was aware of Hamas's attack plans a year before the assault, but officials ignored the warnings. Documents obtained by the Israeli military a year ago detailed Hamas's attack plans on Israel, but the analysis concluded that Hamas lacked sufficient military capability. The New York Times summarized that a series of errors led to the Israeli intelligence committing its most significant mistake since the 1973 Middle East War. News Report 2, Russian offensive in Donetsk and setbacks. Since the beginning of 2023, the Russian military launched its largest-scale offensive in Donetsk Oblast. British intelligence reports indicate that the Russian forces suffered record losses in Afghanistan, averaging 930 soldiers per day in November. The offensive primarily focused on the Afghan region, resulting in severe losses for Russia. During this period, Russia experienced 2 significant logistical setbacks. On December 1, a freight train in Beryat exploded, causing 6 oil tanks to catch fire and destroying 4 tanks. On November 30, a freight train exploded in Siberia, with 3 oil tanks catching fire, and the railway tracks were destroyed. This railway is a crucial route connecting Russia and China, and sources suggest that Ukraine is cutting off various Russian military logistics lines. Meanwhile, Reuters reported that Russian President Putin approved the 2024 budget, allocating 40% of income to the military and military-industrial complex. However, Ukraine successfully destroyed over half of Russia's tanks and armored vehicles before they could be delivered. Ukrainian President Zelensky, in an interview with the Associated Press, expressed dissatisfaction with Ukraine's progress in the counteroffensive, citing a lack of sufficient strength and allied support. Despite Ukraine facing challenges, various political parties and groups in the Ukrainian parliament signed a statement on November 30 opposing temporary presidential elections. The statement emphasized that Ukraine should not hold temporary elections, including presidential and parliamentary elections, until at least 6 months later. According to constitutional provisions, presidential elections should take place in March 2024, and all elections since the imposition of martial law on February 24, 2022, are technically cancelled. News Report 3, Respiratory disease outbreak in China and Taiwan's response. China is facing a respiratory disease outbreak that has garnered international attention. Taiwan airports conducted voluntary virus tests on passengers from China on November 26. As of now, the test results mostly show cases of influenza, with no confirmed cases of pneumonia. Between October 26 and 29, Taiwan airports tested 38 individuals. Among them, 13 cases were influenza, 2 cases were Wuhan pneumonia, 3 cases were adenovirus, 2 cases were rhinovirus, 6 cases were negative, and 11 cases are still pending. The spokesperson for Taiwan's Centers for Disease Control stated on December 1 that, based on current testing data and results, the respiratory infection disease in China has been identified as a known pathogen and is highly contagious in the community. The spokesperson also noted that, at present, Taiwan's influenza cases have been decreasing continuously for 7 months and 7 weeks, with influenza and adenovirus being the predominant types. The current stage is considered low epidemic activity, and Taiwanese citizens need not be overly concerned. News Report 4, Philippines establishes Coast Guard station in the South China Sea. On December 1, the Philippines announced the establishment of a Coast Guard station on the largest island in the South China Sea, Middle Ground Island, to monitor Chinese vessels. The Coast Guard station is set to operate in early 2024 and will be equipped with advanced surveillance systems, including radar, cameras, and satellite tools from Japan. The Philippine National Security Advisor stated that the establishment of the Middle Ground Island Coast Guard Station marks a turning point, and real-time data collection will impact China's aggressive behavior. Simultaneously, Xinhua News Agency reported that President Xi Jinping inspected the Coast Guard East China Sea Command on October 29. The command is subordinate to the China Coast Guard and is a deputy military-level unit, overseeing Coast Guard bureaus in Jiangsu, Shanghai, Zhejiang, and Fujian. Xi Jinping received a work report from the Coast Guard East China Sea Command, emphasizing the need to build a strong Coast Guard force, enhance maritime rights protection and law enforcement capabilities, and defend territorial sovereignty and maritime interests. He also stressed active participation in international and regional maritime governance. On the border affairs front, Hong Liang, Director General of the Department of Boundary and Ocean Affairs at the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Indian Foreign Ministry's Secretary for East Asia Dai Bingran co-chaired the 28th meeting of the China-India Border Affairs Consultation and Coordination Mechanism on November 30. Representatives from both countries' diplomatic, defense, immigration, and other departments attended the meeting. While the specific effects of the meeting were limited, the two countries engaged in discussions and coordination on a range of issues. News Report 5, U.S. Congressional Hearing on China's Global Information Space Influence. Voice of America reported that the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Strategic Competition with China held a hearing on the evening of November 30, discussing how the Chinese Communist Party shapes the global information space. Yu Mao-chun, director of the China Center at the Hudson Institute, attended as a witness and presented some suggestions. During the hearing, Yu Mao-chun proposed that the U.S. Congress legislate to define China as a non-market economy. He suggested that Chinese companies in the U.S. should prove that they are not subject to interference from the Chinese Communist Party. If Chinese companies violate their commitments, they should be expelled from the U.S. market. He also pointed out that China not only seeks to dominate the narrative but also aims to control the e-commerce sector. 2/3 of sellers on Amazon come from China, and some even pay for positive reviews. Republican Congressman Siemens stated that he would introduce a bill requiring sellers on Amazon to label the origin of their products. Additionally, Republican Congressman LaHood questioned whether China's actions truly brought natural allies to the country, pointing out that no one wants to immigrate to China. Yu Mao-chun responded by stating that, although people may inwardly dislike it, China compels submission by creating economic and technological dependencies. Wang Jiaqio, director of research at Freedom House, stated that China's practices are attractive to rulers of authoritarian states. Sydney Morning Herald's correspondent in Beijing, Garnett, pointed out that Xi Jinping has achieved things that were thought impossible a few years ago, such as controlling the military and restricting internet freedom. Therefore, he urged not to underestimate Xi Jinping's capabilities. News Report 6, Pinduoduo surpasses Alibaba in market value. Pinduoduo's closing price exceeded Alibaba's, making it the highest valued Chinese stock as of the closing on November 30. Pinduoduo's closing price was $147, a 4.3% increase, resulting in a market value of $195.9 billion. In comparison, Alibaba's closing price was $74.86, with a 0.25% increase, and a market value of $190.7 billion. Pinduoduo's market value surpassed Alibaba's by $5.2 billion. Following this, Alibaba's rating also faced a rare downgrade from Wall Street. Morgan Stanley downgraded Alibaba from overweight to equal weight and adjusted the target price from $110 to $90. Morgan Stanley listed Pinduoduo as the preferred choice for Chinese e-commerce, considering its advantageous market position, particularly as consumers become increasingly price-sensitive. However, it is essential to note that Pinduoduo has faced controversy due to a significant presence of counterfeit goods on its platform, a focal point of concern for the industry and regulatory authorities. News Report 7, Micronesia's former president accuses China of influencing Pacific Island nations. On November 30, former Micronesian President Panuelo addressed the U.S. Congress, alleging that China is exerting influence on Pacific Island nations through economic coercion and bribery. He pointed out that whenever government officials or legislators enter the Chinese embassy expressing the need for infrastructure such as sports arenas, China rapidly provides economic support, allowing swift infiltration in the Pacific Island region. Panuelo revealed that during his visit to China, Chinese diplomats conveyed a message from President Xi Jinping, assuring that China would fulfill all requests made by Micronesia. Additionally, he disclosed that China offered a joint development initiative at the Pacific Islands Forum to each member country's leader. Panuelo stated that this agreement, proposed by China, allowed the nation access to exclusive economic zones in island countries and collaboration in areas such as marine research. However, ultimately, the member countries of the Pacific Islands Forum rejected the proposed agreement by China. This statement highlights China's efforts to expand its political and economic influence in the South Pacific region, challenging the traditional influence of countries like the United States, Australia, and others. News Report 8, President Biden announces student loan relief. On October 28, President Biden issued a statement announcing the forgiveness of student loans for 813,000 Americans. Biden stated that by relieving the burden of student loans, Americans can more easily buy homes, start businesses, and establish families and careers. This forgiveness not only has positive effects on individuals and families but also has favorable impacts on the overall economy. Simultaneously, the U.S. government also announced the forgiveness of student loans for 662,000 government and nonprofit organization employees, as well as 491,000 disabled individuals. Additionally, 1.3 million borrowers who were deceived by schools received loan forgiveness. Since Biden took office, a total of 125,000 people have received loan forgiveness, amounting to $9 billion, while 3.6 million U.S. borrowers have received a total of $127 billion in debt relief. It's important to note that, despite the Supreme Court rejecting Biden's plan to cancel $400 billion in debt earlier this year, the Biden administration has used other means to alleviate the debt burden for Americans, causing political controversy and receiving both Republican criticism and some supporter praise. News Report 9, Taiwan village leaders investigated for China tours. German broadcaster Deutsche Welle reports that, as the 2024 Taiwan presidential election approaches, an increasing number of Taiwanese village chiefs and leaders are being invited to China for tours, receiving hospitality. Compared to the previous election, more village chiefs and leaders are participating in such Chinese-sponsored tours, showing active interest. These tours have relatively low prices, with participants only needing to pay for airfare, while accommodations, transportation, and meals are covered by local government Taiwan affairs offices. According to Taiwan national security officials, over 1,000 village chiefs and leaders have participated in these Chinese-sponsored tourism activities so far, a significantly larger number than during the previous election. It's noteworthy that China tends to favor hosting village chiefs and leaders who support the Kuomintang, KMT. Prosecutors in Kaohsiung City, Taiwan, stated this week that they are investigating cases of village chiefs who traveled to China. These village chiefs are suspected of violating the Election and Anti-Infiltration Acts. This investigation reflects political tension in cross-strait relations and has drawn widespread societal attention.